Bruce DuMont back in Evanston, Illinois with hour number 2 of Beyond the Beltway. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. And in this hour, we're going to be joined by Michael Lieber. He is a Democrat. He is an attorney. Also, we have Eric Cohen. He is an outspoken conservative and a talk show host, or a libertarian and a talk show host on WIND Radio in Chicago. And Nick Kalm, who runs Reputation Partners. He is our card-carrying conservative Republican gentleman. Nice to have you with us. Eric, I want to begin with you because I know you were listening to a portion of the first hour, and I want to give you an opportunity to sort of respond to the theme of that hour, which was sort of the way in which the media sort of conflated all of the various protest elements that are out there in America. How do you see what's going on in the streets of the cities of the United States?
Well, we're conflating a lot of things, which I think is a problem.
Yes.
So I think you need to identify first that there is, I thought about my experience with the Tea Party movement back in the early 2010s, where you had an organizing ethos, you had a kind of a call to action in local organizing, then you had larger groups. And I would have been, I think that it's completely defensible to say Black Lives Matter. That's a true statement and something we should all agree with. And people who take objection to the actual political group that's been formed around that is a different question. So I think we've conflated not only the organizing ethos and a political organization, we have conflated the people who are there for a specific cause with opportunists who have turned it into an opportunity for violence, rioting, and looting like we saw here in Chicago. We have a whole lot of things being jumbled together and not a whole lot of people endeavoring really on any side to try to separate these things out. And what it does is turns into a distraction from what I think we should be focused on, which is the policy opportunities at hand here, where we could come together on something like ending qualified immunity. I think we could get broad agreement on that. But here we are arguing over rioting, over tearing down statues, which has nothing to do with anything that led to the deaths of people like George Floyd or Breonna Taylor, and it's a shame.
Michael Lieber, how do you see what's happening in the country?
Well, I think when we talk about these riots and looting, we have to remember that what we're talking about is a very, very small section of what's going on in this country. In Portland, Oregon, for example, over the last couple of days, there's been rioting. But that's in about a 4 square block area of downtown Portland. You go 8 blocks away and people don't even know that it's going on. You go 10 miles away out into the suburbs, nobody has any idea. If you're here in Chicago or Tennessee or Maine, it just doesn't affect you. So I think we have to focus on the fact that, yeah, there was some looting in the first couple of days after the George Floyd and Black Lives Matters protests started going. But now mostly it's just peaceful protests by people. So I think we're really needing to focus less on this so-called rioting all over the country and really more of the kitchen table issues that everybody's dealing with right now, like, are my kids going to be able to go back to school? Am I going to have a job? Am I going to be able to visit my elderly parents this summer so their grandkids can see them? Those are the things I think people are really focusing on.
Nick Kalm, describe for us, in your view, how these issues have just sort of gone about their merry way, picking up supporters or protesters against their movement over the last several weeks.
Well, people, thank you. First of all, Bruce, congratulations again on your 40-year anniversary.
Thank you very much. And it's great to be here.
And I would say, again, the conflation that Eric and you were talking about for sure is happening. I mean, people barely even utter George Floyd's name anymore, let alone talk about police reform. The only thing that's being talked about now is whether the political candidates are truly talking about defunding the police or not. There's none of the qualified immunity issue that Eric was talking about. That has all gotten lost in the noise. And Mike knows, I mean, yes, the protests, it's certainly not as if the entire country is under rioting and looting at the moment, thank God.
Would you acknowledge, Nick,
but the media always inflates these things, makes them seem bigger than they are. But again, I think the big issue here, Bruce, is I don't think when you see whether it's Chicago and pulling down or trying to pull down the Christopher Columbus statue yesterday, or what's going on in Portland, or flare-ups that are happening around the country, I don't think the average independent voter is sitting there watching that and going, gosh, you know what? This really makes me want to vote for the Democrats.
Does the president, however, have an opportunity to maybe clarify these issues, or is it impossible for him to do so in a political climate? Because he gravitated to the Antifa. He gravitated to the most violent elements that were out there. And although he spent a day talking about George Floyd and talking about some police reforms, he has not used the bully pulpit to sort of address those issues, which I think probably have maybe support within 90% of the American people. But he's going after the bad guys because of the violence that are associated with them. So he raises their stock.
Well, because we're 4 months from an election, Bruce, less than 4 months, and it's already being defined. And part of what he is clearly coming down on the side of is law and order. And specifically, I mean, even what's going on in Portland with the deploying of federal troops specifically to protect federal property. I mean, it's amazing from a political standpoint. It has gotten the Democrats to come out and be against law enforcement, and it's allowed him to be showing that the federal government that he controls is able to maintain law and order and is the only thing standing between anarchy and civilized society.
Michael, your response.
I think that's a nice attempt to scare old people into thinking that there are marauding hordes of people coming down the street.
That's the media, Mike. It's the media. They're the ones who inflated. I conceded the point that these protests are very localized. I think you're right what you were saying about Portland, even a few blocks away. I was in Washington, D.C. before some of the earlier rioting gone on. I had dinner outside with my brother within sight of the White House. It was completely peaceful until it wasn't 4 blocks away. I totally get that, but the media magnifies it, and it has become an issue, vanquishing the George Floyd issue, completely obliterating the whole police reform issue that, as Bruce said earlier, was something that most people could have gotten behind until there was looting, until there was rioting.
I want to go back.
Lose a good swath of the public.
I want to go back to Michael and your comment about whether or not this is about scaring old people into thinking that things are worse on their streets than in reality. Go ahead.
Right. I mean, I think Donald Trump has to come up with some message for re-election. Most of what he tried before wasn't working. So now he's on to law and order. The polls that came out this weekend, including the one today, the ABC Washington Post poll, actually shows that Biden is doing better on the law and order issue. So I think Trump is going to have to come up with something new because, frankly, most people really aren't that focused on law and order right now. What they're focused on is, do I have a job? Am I going to have a job 6 months from now? Are my kids going to be able to go to school? Am I going to get to watch baseball games? Is there going to be an NFL season this fall? That's what they're focusing. That's what they're talking about around the kitchen table. They're not talking about Confederate flags. They're not talking about statues. They're not talking about defunding the police. They're talking about kitchen table issues, which win elections. And right now, Trump is losing on all of that.
But in some neighborhoods, and by the way, I will say in the neighborhood where I live, which is in the River North area of Chicago, I mean, there are concerns because there was looting on Friday night about a mile north of the statue problem in the South Loop because people were looting a store. And again, there were 2 people shot outside my house last night. I'm Bruce. Bruce DuMont back. Beyond the Beltway continues, and I want to talk right now because we're getting a lot of response on Facebook to the question I'm about to ask, and that is how many people saw the interview today on Fox News between Chris Wallace and President Trump. Anybody on the line with us right now to see that interview? Nick, you did. What was your response to the way that the president conducted himself, as well as Chris Wallace? Go ahead.
I would say. You're asking me?
Yes.
Bruce? Yeah. I would say it was a home run for him, actually. Very high risk, very high reward. And he did a very good job. I mean, look, if you watch Chris Wallace with any kind of regularity, he is tough on both Democrats and Republicans. But I think he's got a particular agenda here when it came to Trump. And when I heard that he was going to be going on against Wallace, I was quite nervous, to be honest with you. But he more than held his own and dealt very well with that stream of questions. The thing that I think Democrats and voters need to really ask themselves is, can they truly picture Joe Biden withstanding, let alone, 10 minutes, let alone an hour of tough grilling from a questioner? They can't. You can't picture that without bursting out into laughter.
Well, let's let Michael Lieber respond to that. We should mention earlier in the year during the primary season, you were for Pete Buttigieg, but like a lot of Pete Buttigieg support, you came over to Joe Biden. But are you confident that he could go one-on-one in not only 3 debates, but also against Chris Wallace and others?
Oh, absolutely. Let's not forget that since last June, Biden has debated against, 10 or fewer, in each of the debates, the Democratic primary debates. He probably had 8, 9, 10 debates between June and when he wrapped up the nomination.
Did he win? Did he win any of them?
Until James Clyburn rescued him in South Carolina. I'm like, come on.
Right. But the fact of the matter is, in the debates, everybody talks about Joe Biden and having gaffes and so forth. He didn't really, he had a couple of things where, he didn't sound great, but there weren't any, jaw-dropping gaffes that he had. He has had, 40 years of debating experience. And I talk about this with Nick all the time. I appreciate that he and Republicans are lowering the expectations for Joe Biden so much when it comes time for debates and interviews with people like Chris Wallace and so forth, because while Joe Biden might not, hit a grand slam, he's going to do just fine. And if the expectations are so low, it's going to be like he hit it out of the park.
Eric Cohen, your response to how the media has covered this race thus far, and do you have concerns about Joe Biden's ability to go all the way to Election Day?
About Joe Biden's ability? No, not particularly, because like most reelection campaigns, especially one in the circumstances we have now, this is a referendum on the incumbent. And if you're actually looking at the polling data, you find that the incumbent is not particularly popular. You see that he is down in the national average to Joe Biden about 8.5 points. Right. That you have states that should not be in play for Democrats if Trump is going to win re-election, like Florida, like North Carolina. The latest average in Iowa only has Trump up 1.5 points. It doesn't look particularly good. And with all due respect to Nick, calling it a home run is just, to me, just partisan nonsense. I mean, Donald Trump is not the best interviewer. Neither is Joe Biden at this point. But go back to Bruce's question from earlier about, the jumble of issues that we talked about in the last segment. Could Trump help clarify any of them? Could an average president? Probably. Donald Trump is a man completely incapable of the kind of clarity and nuance that's necessary to unjumble those things for people. And him ranting about law and order, it may have worked for Nixon in 1968, running as someone who is not currently in the office. But with all this going down under Donald Trump's watch and him saying, elect me for law and order, well, why aren't we having it right now if that's the case? Then he should act if that's what he believes he would do. But he's not doing it.
He's not the mayor and he's not the governor, Eric.
So then what would he be promising to do by ranting about law and order? What's the promise there?
Eric, as a libertarian, do you think TV coverage and news coverage of statue toppling, rioting, and looting makes an independent voter, which I presume you would describe yourself as? Does that make you and other independents gravitate to the Democrats? Yes or no?
It doesn't make me, but it doesn't seem to me the question that people are actually operating on, because it seems to me that people are reviewing whether or not they want another 4 years of Donald Trump. And the answer to that from the polling data that we see now overwhelmingly seems to be no, they do not.
And
one
Bruce,
thing, by the way, go ahead, Michael, and then I want to follow up. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I mean, to his point just then, in a recent interview, Donald Trump was asked, what are you going to do with the second term? And he really couldn't come up with anything. And I think if pressed, most Republicans really can't come up with anything. He has no plan on coronavirus. He doesn't really have any play. Hopefully it'll magically go away. That's his plan. So which means his plan on the economy is hopefully coronavirus will magically go away. And his plan with racial unrest and so forth is hopefully it'll just go away.
What is Biden's plan, Michael? What is Biden's plan? For any one of those three things.
Sure. I mean, Biden's plan on the coronavirus, look back at what look back at what he and Obama did under their administration. They had a robust
Can Joe
group that
Biden
was.
can Joe Biden do anything but look in the rearview mirror? We want a president that's going to look forward. Don't pat yourself on the back for what you did with Barack Obama on your side. What are you going to do right now? What are the significant changes that Joe Biden would make if he was elected president of the United States?
Okay,
Simple.
on coronavirus, he is going to spend a lot of money on testing, tracing, and making sure that people actually wear masks and having a national coordinated effort to tackle this.
How does he do it?
What we needed in the first place.
How does he make people wear masks? Tell me. What does he do?
He mandates it by law. He does it himself. His team does it. And people realize, hey, if I want to see football, if I want to keep my job, if my kids want to go to school, let's do the right thing and wear masks when we're out around people. That's what he's going to do. That's going to help the economy.
Could Joe Biden mandate that? Eric Cohen, your response. Could Joe Biden mandate any of the stuff that Michael just said?
To my understanding, you cannot mandate that from a national level.
Right.
Now, I would agree, though, that what was funny to watch was Donald Trump having an appearance about a week ago or so and wearing a mask, and his peanut gallery of campaign people all on Twitter saying just how manly he looks and how fantastic it is, which, to me reads that, they finally got him to do it and they want him to think it looks good. So he'll keep doing it because it's a good idea for him to set an example and do that, which gives you an idea of just what kind of a mess that campaign may very well be in, replacing its campaign manager now with someone with more experience. I don't think it's a good sign for them. And there are such simple things that Trump could do that could be helpful, which is why to suggest that, things will get better as we move closer to election day, they could very well get worse because Donald Trump is the least disciplined candidate I think I've ever witnessed.
What's a simple thing he could do in your view?
Just from the beginning, he could have just adopted the procedure of wearing a mask, not trying to turn it into the culture war issue, which he always fights on.
In the future, let's not look in the rearview mirror. In the future, what could he do? If he were to call up after the show tonight,
he could start doing that right now.
Okay.
I think that would be something that he could posit that he could start doing right now in terms of trying to set a good example. As a libertarian, I'm always wary of these looking to the president as some kind of great figure to lead us, but people do, and he can set a good example, and he should start doing it.
Nick, one thing
Bruce,
one second. I want to follow up to Nick, because Nick, you said that the president, you thought he hit a home run today. I disagree with that. I thought he really screwed up on the question when he made the charge that Joe Biden has said that he wants to defund the police.
No, he didn't.
All right, can I ask my question? In my view, he did. Because I don't believe that Joe Biden has actually said that he wants to defund the police. So my question
go back and watch the point when Wallace cuts away and shows the little segment that he has after that portion of the interview. Hang on. In which he acknowledges that Biden's platform talks about redirecting resources away from police departments to other functions that can perform those responsibilities.
Does any of that make sense? Does any of that make sense to you?
Bruce, you may not want to call that defunding the police. That is defunding the police. That is what he was saying. When they came with the papers and they showed them to him, did they have the right paper that showed that? No, they didn't. They didn't. And the fact that that the mainstream media focused on that one issue as the only, Trump really screwed it up. An hour interview? I mean, Mike is kidding himself and your listeners if he thinks that Joe Biden could do 5 minutes of that kind of an interview. It's a joke, Mike. It's a joke.
Mike, follow up on the issue of I want to ask Michael right now on whether or not, above and beyond whether or not Joe Biden could withstand that type of pressure. We don't know yet because it's been a long time since he's done it. My question to you, Michael, is the issue of defunding the police, is that a bumper sticker, whether it's right or wrong, is that a bumper sticker that Joe Biden can withstand?
Well, it's not something that he's for. He hasn't campaigned on it. He's explicitly rejected it. And let's not forget that defunding the police, whoever came up with that, has the worst marketing folks ever, because it's not about
That's
defunding the police. Like, hey, we're going to get rid of all the police. It's, hey, some of the money that we spend on police, doing speeding ticket stops or dealing with mentally ill people, let's give that to other people who could probably do it better, so that the police can be out there stopping murderers and rapists and robbers. And
Mike, what did the
Michael, I
Minneapolis
agree.
City Council
Michael, I
vote
agree with
unanimously
you.
to do?
Michael, I agree with you that's a bad bumper sticker. But I will tell you, it's a line that's sticking to Joe Biden. It's not sticking to anybody else. Now, again, you can wish it away, but somebody said it. It got affixed to Joe Biden, and Joe Biden is going to spend a lot of time, responding to it. And if he comes out strongly against it, then I think he may run into some problems with his, left wing, or his most left wing base. And we'll talk about that when we come back. I'm Bruce DuMont, from coast to coast and border to border and around the world at BeyondTheBeltway.com. Bruce DuMont back on Beyond the Beltway, and as I mentioned, I was off last week. Paul Lisnick was sitting in for me as I was nursing my tongue after a little operation that I had. It's a little better this evening. Hopefully, not too much slurring of my comments tonight. But last week I had the uniqueness. I could listen to it on the radio. I could listen to it, or I could watch it on Facebook, and I could also watch it on YouTube. And also I could watch it, and listen to it later on as well, which I always can do. But one thing I noticed last week is that if you're watching the show, sometimes when you watch it on YouTube, there is some delays, there's some freezing that comes up. But whenever I flipped over and watched it on Facebook Live, it was like really live. There wasn't a lot of delay, and so I guess my advice would be, unless I just caught it on a bad night, if you're watching this program, you can watch it on Facebook Live. And again, if you don't do it on Facebook Live and you want to become a friend, you go to Beyond the Beltway with Bruce DuMont. Ask to be a friend, because that's where you can see the live version of the show. Of course, when it's all over, you can always go to BeyondTheBeltway.com. You can see it there as well as we do it live, but also you can see that on delay. And of course, there's no such thing as missing the program, because we're up there right away. As soon as the show is over, you can go back either to the Facebook Live or go to YouTube or go to BeyondTheBeltway.com, and you can find it. And if you want to listen to just the audio portion of the show, you can go to Spotify and a lot of the other audio sites and hear the program as well. So there's lots of way to see and hear the program. And again, just a little observation I made last week. Right at this moment, I'd like to take some time and let each of our guests take a moment to introduce themselves and tell us why they are here tonight. And we begin with a relative new favorite of this program, Michael Lieber. Go ahead, Michael.
Thanks, Bruce. I'm Mike Lieber. I'm an attorney here in Chicago. I'm the principal of my own law firm, Lieber Law Group. I'm a born and raised and proud native Hoosier, but I've lived in Chicago for about 25 years and just love talking politics. I'm an absolute political junkie, so it's great to be back on the show.
Eric Cohen, tell us who you are.
Along with Joe Kaiser, I host Sources with Knowledge on News Talk 560 WIND in Chicago, 3 p.m. on Sundays. You can tune in there, or you can look up Sources with Knowledge on wherever your local favorite podcast feed is. And my day job, I am the Director of Communications at the Acton Institute for the Study of Religion and Liberty. I also encourage you to check out our Acton Line podcast. I had a great conversation with David French that just posted last Wednesday about the Supreme Court term. So I encourage you to check that out.
And Nick Comm. Nick?
Yes, thank you, Bruce. I'm Nick Comm. I'm the founder and president of a firm called Reputation Partners. We're a communications consulting firm based in Chicago, working across the country for corporations, universities, not-for-profits, and individuals with reputation challenges and opportunities.
Usually around this time every 4 years, I'm getting very excited because I'm on my way to the Democratic convention and or the Republican convention. it's going to be somewhat subdued insofar as the Democrats are concerned. That looked like where there was going to be a lot of action, at least a couple of months ago. Michael Lieber, does the Democratic Party do they lose any significant amount of support or recognition or media focus by not having a full-fledged convention this year?
I think there's probably some drop off. Every 4 years we do see the candidates get some kind of bounce in the polls coming out of the convention. I don't know that we're going to see that with either, because whatever happens in Jacksonville with the Republicans is going to be, perhaps outside, somewhat subdued. We really just don't know. But yeah, I think. Yes, there are those of us who are political junkies who watch a lot of it. For most people, maybe they'll watch the presidential candidate give their speech. Presumably, Joe Biden will do that in some form or fashion. Hopefully, the Democrats are going to be kind of creative with how they do it and create a little bit of energy. He's also going to be introducing his vice presidential running mate, shortly before that. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a little bit of a hit, but I think it's probably going to affect both parties. Probably pretty equal.
Nick Khan, how would you say the Republican convention is going to be in Jacksonville? It's been moved there. It's a month later. Is the big news story there going to be how many people are going to be dropping dead? Isn't that what the media is going to be looking for?
Well, I think the bigger issue is going to be whether the arena is full. That seemed to be unfortunately, the fatal error in Tulsa.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons from what you can see and why Brad Parscale was replaced as the campaign manager with 4 months to go. Look, we know that Trump really thrives on having these rallies. That's where he personally gets a lot of energy, and there's a lot that happens there. So this is really going to be a challenge, I think, for both candidates. I mean, will Trump deliver his acceptance speech from a half-full arena? Will Joe Biden accept the nomination from his basement?
Eric. Joe Joergensen, the Libertarian Party candidate for President of the United States, was a guest on this program several weeks ago. When I introduced you as a libertarian, are you a member of the Libertarian Party, or is Joe Joergensen someone that you would consider voting for, or where do you put yourself and your political vote right at the moment?
I'm a small L libertarian, not a big L libertarian. Much as it disappoints me, we are in a binary two-party system where third parties, as I forget the thinker who's had the line, but it's a great line, that third parties in America primarily have their effect by being like bees. They sting once and then they die. The inability of the Libertarian Party to nominate somebody of substance like Justin Amash, which I think would have actually been something interesting, is a disappointment this time around. But I would, even if Amash were the candidate, I would expect that person is going to get a much smaller share of the vote than Gary Johnson did 4 years ago, in part because you had the two most unpopular candidates in the history of their parties running in Trump and Hillary Clinton. And while Donald Trump is still one of the most unpopular candidates for president in American history, Joe Biden is just not. So a lot of those objection votes that Gary Johnson got are probably going to go to Joe Biden this time. And I think we're seeing that in polling data where people who dislike both candidates overwhelmingly break to Joe Biden.
Nick, would you respond to that analysis by Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, there's no question that Donald Trump is a polarizing figure and that Hillary Clinton was much more disliked than Joe Biden was and is. Again, but you can only hide a candidate in the basement, especially one that is as infirm as he is, for so long. I understand Mike's point about lowering expectations for the debates, but if he comes out, we saw, look, in the last debates in 2012, that first debate that Mitt Romney really wiped the floor with Barack Obama because he wasn't taking it seriously. You saw Romney pick up a number of points. And then at the next debate, Obama woke up and came back and did a lot better. I think this is an unprecedented election. There's no question that the enthusiasm for Trump and against Trump, no matter who the Democratic candidate is, are very, very strong. That's why what's going to happen here in these next 4 months. Plus, look, 4 months ago, we barely knew what coronavirus was. This is the kind of year it is. There's too many wild cards between now and then for Mike or others to basically be doing a touchdown dance in the 20-yard line.
Mm-hmm. Well, also, You're right about that. But the other issue is that, or when coronavirus did pop up, the news media basically said, okay, here's the issue where Trump can maybe get back in the ball game, erase a lot of the errors that he has created, at least perceived errors amongst moderate Republicans and suburban women, as it was generally described. And again, no one seems to think that the president has seized the coronavirus issue in any significant way where he's really moved the needle. In fact, people would say that maybe he's lost ground on that. But
Bruce,
would
Bruce,
you?
no candidate could have,
Let me
Bruce.
just go ahead. Go ahead, Nick. Go ahead.
I was just,
Then
no,
I'm going to ask my
look,
question.
it's an uncontrollable virus. This whole earlier argument about masks, you've got over 80+% acceptance of mask wearing across party lines. Okay, we've got similar numbers who are against masks, who believe that they saw Elvis at the Kmart last week. Who believe
Bruce.
the Earth is flat. Who believe that
Michael,
we never walked on the moon.
I want to
it's
go to Michael, and then
uncontrollable virus, and we're testing more than ever. Okay,
All right.
These are false issues. It doesn't matter who the president is; they would not have been able to so-called control this uncontrollable virus.
I want to go. I want to go to Michael to let him respond, and then you're going to come back to me, and I'm going to finish the question I started to ask. Michael, go ahead.
Thanks, Bruce. Coronavirus, in a counterintuitive way, served up re-election to Donald Trump on a platter. Had he taken action in January, shutting down people coming into the United States, not just from China, but anybody who had been in China in the last 6 months, anybody from anywhere, had he done that, had he started robust testing, had he put in the War Powers Act to produce masks and ventilators, all these things, we actually, when everything kind of went downhill, when everything shut down in mid-March, we actually saw Donald Trump's poll numbers pop because people in a crisis rally around the president. Believe it or not, if you go back to Jimmy Carter, right after the hostages were taken, his poll numbers popped.
Joe Biden, by the way, was saying
to
nothing
give somebody a
at this point.
chance. But the problem was we saw with Trump what we knew all along. This is a guy who is incapable of change, incapable of leadership, and simply doesn't really want to do the job. He just wants to have the trappings of the presidency, but he's not willing to do the work.
Okay. Here is the question I want to ask, and we're going to give everybody a couple of minutes to think about the answer, and we're going to come back to you, Nick. But the question that I'm asking is, at this moment, the debate is whether or not schools should open or not. You have those on the local level. Some say it should, some say it shouldn't. You have people at the CDC and other organizations, the American Pediatric Association, saying, yes, open the schools. It's a debate. I don't think it's a clear line between Republicans or Democrats or even liberals and conservatives. But when we come back, the question to you, Nick, is this the issue where Donald Trump can get back in the ballgame? Back shortly. Bruce DuMont back on Beyond the Beltway. And again, if you're watching the program either on Facebook or on YouTube or on WYCC, not WYCC, Comcast Television in Chicago. I mean, going in and out of our breaks now, we are showing video or showing clips from various affiliate markets all over the United States that carry this program. And a little fun game you can play each and every week is you can see if you can identify the part of the country that we are showing. Let's now go back to Nick Com. My question to you, Nick, I'll let you come up first with this one. Does the debate over schools give the president an opportunity to step up, articulately lead the nation in making this important decision? Yes or no?
Yes, he does. And again, you've got the American Association of Pediatrics. You've got who are saying that schools need to be reopened. There's study after study about the children that are being lost for, it could be more than just a year that they've been out of school and distance learning, so to speak. They need to get back into school. This hybrid model, a working parent, I've got working parents who work for me. What are they going to do with 2 days on, 3 days off? It's nonsense. Get the kids back. The number of children who've actually gotten sick from this virus are infinitesimal. Now, yes, I understand that you can have asymptomatic carrying and all of that, and you've got older adults that are teaching them, test them, protect them, okay? But get the kids back in school. And if Donald Trump came out in favor of that, as he has even more strongly, I think that's a winning issue for him.
Michael Lieber, my question to you, does this represent an opportunity for Joe Biden? If he were to clearly articulate his position on this, would this solidify his alleged lead in the campaign?
Yeah, I think it would. I don't know that there's any perfect answer. First of all, as a parent of 3 kids who are in, going into twins going into 11th grade and a 7th kid going into 7th grade, like pretty much all parents, I want my kids physically in school 5 days a week. For their benefit, for my benefit, for everybody's benefit. I don't think that there's really much debate about what people want. Everybody wants the same thing. I don't want to have to wear a mask when I go to the grocery store. I do. I don't want to, but I do. I think if Joe Biden says, look, the answer is let's listen to the scientists. If the answer for right now, for at least the first semester of this fall school year is half on, half off, which is obviously not optimal, as Nick just said. But in the meantime, let's do the work to get rid of COVID. So come January, kids can be back in school full time, 5 days a week. That would be a great answer.
Should we then, to Eric Cohen, should we basically say that the school districts of the country, nothing from the nation, nothing from the state, the school districts around the United States, maybe you do it by state, but I want to think about the school districts. Do the experts there, upon consultation with scientists, make the decision about their schools? And everybody, hands off. That's the decision. And people, if your kids go to that school, you have to abide by it. Is that an answer that's reasonable now, Eric?
So as a parent of a 7 and a 9-year-old, I want to echo what Mike said about, yes, absolutely, I want to get them back into schools. But what I think is interesting here is, we're talking about this from a national perspective. The answer to this is not a nationalized answer.
Right.
And just saying simply we should open schools or schools should be closed or we should have a hybrid model belies the fact that this is an enormous country with incredibly different places. And it is similar to the problem we had in the beginning of this, where New York City had it particularly bad. And there was this kind of reverse, the word escapes me at the moment, this reverse problem where we wanted everybody to live as if they lived in New York City. The answer for New York City, for Chicago, may be radically different than the answer for Garrison, Montana. And the right answer is to tell those local people closest to the issue to be smart about it and make the decisions for themselves and stop making national declarations as if the federal government should know the answer to this. They don't. They shouldn't be proclaiming on it. It should be a local issue.
Nick, should the president be more clear in that schools will make the individual decision? I mean, the president likes the idea of everybody going back to school, but he doesn't have the power to dictate that. But my question is, if he takes the response that he did insofar as opening up a state, he basically said, we're going to let the governors decide. In this particular case, he's sending it back again to either the states or, I believe, the individual school districts and say, we're going to let you guys make the decision. We know that you don't want to kill the kids. You're going to make intelligent decisions. You're educators. We're going to let you make that decision. And by that, does he not wash his hands of whatever happens, whether it's good or bad? He's passing it back to whoever should have it, which is the closest entity to the school children.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's as Eric was talking about earlier in terms of masking and all of that, it is a bully pulpit. He can set an example. I think in this case, he can do what he is doing and needs to do even more, which is encouraging schools to open wherever possible. And Eric is right. This is a big country. It's not a monolith. That's also why you don't want to do things like nationalize mask requirements, because it is a different country and you've got different issues in different places. And you do have to leave it up to folks. He'd be quite the hypocrite. And I know that some people view that he is often a hypocrite, but he would be quite the hypocrite if he suddenly dictated that everybody in the country had to follow his direction on schools reopening.
Michael, quick answer to you. Will we see perhaps unions rearing their head, whether it's a good head or an ugly head, depending on your political position? Will they be standing in the schoolhouse door saying, don't open these schools or not?
Very possibly. I wouldn't be surprised.
You already are.
I think it makes more sense for the school boards to work with the teachers and the parents to make the right decision. And I agree with Eric. The right decision in Chicago or New York may be very different from Shelby, Montana, someplace in Montana.
So let
that he
the
mentioned.
school board make the
Harrison.
decision. No, it's let the school board and the scientists make the decision, not the union leaders. Everybody agree on that? I think we do.
Yes.
On that point, I want to
Yes.
thank Michael Lieber, our Democrat. Our conservative Republican has been Nick Kalm. Our Libertarian has been Eric Cohen. I thank you very much. Our thanks to Andrew Marshall for their assistance in the production of this program. I'm Bruce DuMont. Good night from Evanston, Illinois.